If you think I'm exaggerating a little, I have this Fortune magazine cover called Partners in Crime. It's interesting that they use the word crime in here and not just kind of, ooh, this is a scandal, or something more milder. This is the untold story of how Citi, JP Morgan Chase, and Merrill Lynch helped Enron pull off one of the greatest scams ever. And again, this is their term, greatest scam ever. And again, this is kind of a very mainstream, respectable business magazine that's making the claim, not some kind of leftist publication or other things. So we have Fastow here as kind of ringleader in one of the greatest scams ever, getting 10 years. We have Sullivan up as kind of the next greatest scam, and we'll kind of see how that plays out. I guess a couple of questions to leave you with. And I know that normally I'm supposed to provide all the answers here. In this case, I don't have them, and I'd kind of like to throw out a couple of other contexts, the things that we should be looking at here. First of all, during congressional hearings on Enron, Senator Biden, who's chair of the Judiciary Committee, commented that if you steal a car out of my driveway and drive it across to Pennsylvania, 10 years in prison. If you take a pension, misdemeanor, maximum 1 year. The pension may be worth $108 million. My car might be worth $2 million, but the sentences still stand. So I guess this is pretty amazing that you can steal almost $2 million out of a pension and get a maximum of 1 year in prison for doing it. Granted, it doesn't have quite the same terror. It's not quite as personable as somebody taking the car out of your driveway, but still, that's obviously inappropriate. There's a criminal justice issue here about equal treatment. There's also a second level to this, that as we all start to have 401ks that we start to contribute to, we're not really thinking about retirement yet, but all the stuff that's come out from the Hill is Social Security is going to be cut one way or another. It's a matter of time. We're going to start putting up the retirement age. It's probably more important than ever. Folks my age, your age, have their own pension plans in place and safeguard those really, really, really carefully. Are we happy that somebody can steal $2 million and get a year in prison if that is our money at stake? How much more punishment do we think we really need in order to safeguard our pensions so we have a secure retirement? Obviously, secure doesn't mean everything else, but it at least means somebody's there not siphoning off money, doing lots of other things. We need to have a certain amount of faith, if we're not going to have Social Security, that the money we put into a pension fund is going to be there. We can't be protected from speculative losses all the time, but at a minimum, the criminal justice system should do a much better job protecting us from threats like this, somebody misappropriating this, which is really stealing. We just put a nice name on it. So I guess the question that comes out of that is, did Sarbanes-Oxley actually change that? And what kind of punishments are now in place for people who steal money from pension funds? I'm actually still working on that. I hope to kind of dig through some congressional hearings on this to find out a little bit more what Congress knew in all these hearings and whether the legislation has actually addressed all of those problems. Secondly, we have this experience actually fairly recently of another major financial scandal and how it's played out. During the 80s, we had the savings and loans situation. I know a lot of people didn't necessarily remember that. It tends to be forgotten because it was never really paid attention to because it was financial fraud. But this is an event, a whole series of events that cost us up to $1 trillion. The bailout that we gave the savings and loan was about $500 billion to begin with, and there's debt and there's lots of other things that kind of pile on top of that. Some people went to jail, not often for very long. We took some money back, but it was never as much as they plundered from the S&Ls. All of this happened right after deregulation. We decided that regulating banks wasn't a good idea, that we should unleash the competitive forces of the marketplace and allow banks to do anything that they really wanted to do without a lot of oversight. And what happened, they made risky ventures, they made bad decisions. A lot of insiders used the bank to basically loot it for themselves. So this is a normal white-collar crime where the corporation commits crimes that benefit the corporations. We had this insider collective embezzlement where you use the institution and milk it dry for personal gain. On the heels of that, we did pass a couple of laws that did a couple things with banking. But soon afterwards, within a couple of years, we'd forgotten it, and we start deregulating lots of other aspects of our financial system, and we come along with Enron and WorldCom and Tyco and lots of other companies that have all been in the news for overstating financial results. So how is it that we can have this massive theft, $1 trillion that we pay back, and then a couple of years later go and deregulate more of industry and not kind of learn a lesson from that? So I guess that's the other great question here. Why did that happen? Why, on the heels of one of the largest kind of white-collar scams up to that time, do we kind of wait a couple of years and then deregulate, rather than kind of using that as some momentum to pick up and say, geez, we should have got a lot harsher because a lot of people lost their life savings and savings as loans as well, times when they were cleaned out, times when they got burned by how things went. Rather than offer greater protection to people, we go and let an industry do more of whatever it likes, and we find more people getting burned. Have we really solved this, or is in 2 years we're going to undo everything in Sarbanes-Oxley and repeat this sometime again 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How do we start to deal with that so this doesn't happen again, so we actually make this stick and we can build on it, rather than building on it for a couple of years and then letting it go again and waiting for the next scam to happen? I guess the last part of this is that a lot of folks have said that Enron didn't actually have a lot of clout in Washington. As things were coming apart at the end, they were trying to call President Bush and call Cheney and call other folks, and they really didn't do anything for him. Therefore, the millions of dollars that Enron has paid to Bush really didn't pay off. This is a particularly interesting question because Ken Lay and George Bush go way back. Enron has spent about $6 million for Bush over the course of his various campaigns, from state governor all the way on. It's well known that President Bush likes to give people nicknames, and Ken Lay is his Kenny boy, kind of that nice, close, homey relationship that they used to have, going to baseball games and other things. Bush is out of Texas. Enron is a Houston company. They are tight going way back. So what exactly did Enron get for their money was kind of one of the questions that come up. If they didn't get Bush to answer them in the last couple of days and step in and save them, was all this money for naught? There's actually an interesting answer provided by John Dean. This isn't Howard Dean, who just dropped out of the presidential race. This is John Dean, who was former counsel to President Nixon. He's been around for a while. He obviously knows politics very well from having done fundraising, been in as the president's lawyer for a while, so he kind of knows this well. This is kind of his answer in a column that's on FindLaw.com. He said that if we just focus on kind of the last part of this, it ignores the larger picture of how Enron's contributions may have helped slow detection of its troubles and helped the company fly under the radar for as long as possible, given what now appears to be some egregious accounting and business practices. So he's kind of saying, one, obviously people were a little bit slow on the uptake because of the money. Obviously nobody raised warning flags until the company announces the largest bankruptcy ever. He says, indeed, Enron's investment in Washington radically changed the regulatory laws that permitted them to grow from an insignificant gas pipeline company into the 7th largest company in the United States. And then, of course, they can fail as the largest bankruptcy. He says, moreover, when Enron hit the wall, the Bush administration remained mute, even knowing Enron was disintegrating. Certainly, the former governor of Texas had some idea what it would mean to his beloved state. For one thing, 20,000 employees of Enron would be out of work, their 401k plans worthless. Surely a man with a Harvard MBA could envision the devastation this business failure of a company he once promoted would have on countless thousands of Enron stock and bond holders, not to mention major lending institutions that had provided Enron working capital. In all these ways, he writes, through favorable regulatory changes, lack of government oversight, and administration silence until the very end, Enron's investment in Washington paid very handsome returns for a few insiders who personally made millions. They obviously wanted billions from Enron. Sometimes buying influence can simply mean buying silence, not buying specific actions or intervention. And I guess the question I would leave you with is, what can we do about this in terms of campaign finance, in terms of trying to take back democracy, so we don't, again, set ourselves up for another example that will take our own pensions or something else very close behind. I want to make sure we don't leave another ticking time bomb, having been through the SNLs, having been through Enron and WorldCom, how is it that we can kind of use these questions to frame a future where this doesn't happen again and there aren't a large number of people, middle Americans, poor folks, who are ripped off for a lot of money that gets misappropriated back up to the rich. I mean, this is how we end up having the poor get poorer and the rich get richer all the time. Part of it's through these colossal frauds. And this is something that the criminal justice system should end and it should protect us from. Thanks very much for your time.